It's no secret that characters are a core aspect of Fire Emblem's identity, with each game being dedicated to fleshing them out through either the narrative or support conversations, and it's one of the numerous reasons I love this series so much. Each competitor also has a job to accomplish on the front lines, and help to subsidize the army's success, and personally, I'd claim that the bulk of blokes and babes contained within each cartridge prevail both on and off the battlefield, though in some cases a few dunderheads are nothing more than dead weight. So let me see if I understand correctly. Not only do you suck at swordplay, but you're also an insufferable imbecile? Third door from the left, please. Regrettably, not all of our allies can be proficient in both practices, and I've noticed that if a candidate can't hold their own in combat, they typically contain more than enough flair and fascination to keep me from relegating them to the benevolent bench, with these 10 townsfolk giving new meaning to the notion that the pen is mightier than the sword, which in the case of FE7 is probably true. So join me everyone, as I set forth to determine whose value lies within conversations and colleagues instead of swords and spears, as I count down the top 10 good Fire Emblem characters that are bad units. So when it comes to assessing each applicant, the criteria is going to be slightly unorthodox, since how I feel towards an ally's appraisal is entirely opinion-based, and highly subjective regarding personality and other factors. The assessment of their performance is conversely from an objective point of view, and based on impartial factors, so my personal experience is of no use. How I plan to position the collective cast is in relation to how I interpret the strength of their characterization in correlation to how weak their battle prowess beseeches them. So for example, Erica I believe to be an exceptional character, stupid decision notwithstanding, and one of my favourites, but her statistical status only shows an average unit. Not downright bad, so spoiler, she's not making the cut. And if you just so happen to disagree with my choices or feel specific squires should be switched, that's perfectly fine, you have every right to feel whichever way. Also by the way, spoilers in general, so just keep that in mind. And don't worry, I'll be sure to tackle the other side of the spectrum next time. Because who needs personality when you've got bases, am I right? And with all that cleared up, it's time to witness how my terrific teammates can triumph through text as opposed to their embarrassing enactments when engaging the enemy. But as I've always cared more for temperament rather than tactics, I am more than willing to overlook these facetious fighters for the immaculate individuals that they are. Rebecca. Archers on average get the short end of the stick in terms of effectiveness, as they're often observed to be objectively bad units and typically tossed aside faster than your average 7th generation first person shooter. For what it's worth, games like Echoes and Radiant Dawn actually allow snipers to shine, but usually these marksmen are mitigated to being mediocre, and holy heck did Blazing Sword make them about as useless as Aqua! Alas, Rebecca manifested this mistreatment as one of the most atrocious archers in the series, which despite faulting on the forefront, I will happily disregard to allow her to converse with the rest of the crew that revealed to me one of the sweetest sisters on the continent with fairly fascinating subplots that I make her a must pick most of the time. Until Louise shows up and gives her the jazz treatment. As is typical of most marksmen, Rebecca has the unfortunate setback of being permanently bow and footlocked in conjunction with low bases, which will make it difficult for her to acquire kills even with solid growth rates and high availability. Partnered with Rebecca's piss-poor strength stat, which will make it difficult for her to take down even the flimsiest of flyers, and is a largely ill-advised investment as the remaining rangers are superior while requiring less resources. Compounding these circumstances is that FE7 hates archers more so than Smash Bros hates Little Mac, as now they only deal double damage to flying units instead of the usual triple, though thankfully it's not all doom and gloom, as her high availability grants Rebecca just enough time to hopefully gain good level ups, which can make a world of difference, along with ascertaining an impressive speed build, which doesn't exactly mean much considering most enemies in FE7 are slower than a Brass Beast Heavy, but it's better than nothing, and I wouldn't call her the worst unit in the game since that's one award no one can take away from Carla. Despite being such a shocking shot, myself and many others like to deploy Rebecca regularly, which I reason is due to the abundant amounts of appeal that comes from the sugar plum. As soon as Ella's adventure begins, Rebecca enters with an upbeat attitude, and a very perky persona that I feel makes her absolutely adorable, and so enchanting when interacting with the rest of the team. Speaking of which, her support chain I feel to be vastly virtuous. Having a rousing recollection with Lady Louise that outlines how she became both beautiful and badass, is highly appreciative of Lowen's efforts more so than anyone else in the army, and is even able to make friends with the rambunctious Raven. Heck, her supports are home to a subsequent number of subplots that revolve around her friendship with Will, what he did when he left the village, and how it ties into the theory that Dart is her brother. Thanks to hosting such a diverse collection of discussions, both Rebecca and her partners are depicted in an assortment of circumstances, and though all the evidence points to Rebecca acting as the foremost bench warmer, I've got no problems allowing her to get in on the action as a way of witnessing so many exciting exchanges, plus I just love her optimistic and appreciative attitude, even if sometimes she likes to exaggerate the truth.
Oh, Lowen, you're such an amazing and talented knight!
Trust me, it's nothing. Besides, I'm not nearly as incredible as you think.
Nonsense, good sir! In fact, I'd go so far as to say you are the best mounted unit in the game!
Walk that trick! Walk that trick!
Sonya. Having to choose one unit over the other in Fire Emblem games often allocates an assortment of additional content. However, I've noticed that when it comes to performance, the options are rather obvious. I mean, let's face it, Echidna beats Sparta, Harkin shits on Corel, Geitz makes Wallace irrelevant, and the less said about Shannon the better. These one-sided situations extend to Echoes, as the fact of the matter is, Dean is a far superior soldier to Sonya in almost every aspect, with the vengeful Vixen being rather poor in regards to her statistical standing. And yet, I end up smitten and selecting this bewitching beauty time and again, for I find it to be one of the most unique and stimulating singularities in Valentia, not to mention quite the magnificent mistress. Seriously, even the likes of Camilla would be attracted to you.
I'll play with you.
Midway through Celica's quest, she has the choice to face off against Sonya or Dean, and their clone army because Echoes doesn't know the meaning of the word variety. If Celica decides to defeat the malicious mercenary, she will be given the opportunity to recruit Sonya into her party, only to realise that she made a terrible mistake. And it wouldn't be the first time.
What's that? An evidently evil man who's been manipulating me since I set out on this crusade wants me to give up my life for an obviously evil scheme despite all my friends telling me it's a trap? I don't see any problem whatsoever.
Alright, come on, over the plate. Let's see the old stuff here, pal. Come on now. Chuck 'em, baby. Hum, baby, hum, baby. Here's the pitch. And he is out of here.
Sonya starts with a relatively solid build and good growth rates too, bearing in mind this is by Echo standards, so she's not dreadful upon arrival unlike a lot of bad units. But that being said, Dean's base digits are far greater and his class line is better too. Plus the remaining mages will outshine her 9 times out of 10, doubly so since Sonya doesn't even have access to spells like Seraphim, in addition to slight fragility and only 4 move. Well, at least the night class have someone to talk to. To Sonya's credit, she can at least do stuff at base, and with a few lucky level ups, she may end up being just as spellbinding as she is sexy, as I've experienced firsthand. And well, let's just say she's my number 2 pick for a summer ult.
Well then, who's number 1?
Who do you think? So yeah, if your priority is performance, Dean is the clear-cut candidate. Yet as someone who prefers personality, I will typically select Sonya. This sensational sorceress I view as such a fabulous Fire Emblem female who contains vast volumes of style and allure. She practically stole every scene she was in, particularly during her support with Jenny, which takes a slightly different approach to relationship building. For clarification, Sonya is actually the daughter of Jeddah, who had 2 other children before her until they were sacrificed as part of his practices, with Sonya next in line to suffer the same fate. Fortunately, she was able to escape and will forever hold a gigantic grudge against her father, something she reveals to Jenny when the little lamb exclaims that Sonya reminds her of her mother with how she looks, and then sheds light on just how cruel she was, because shitty parents and Fire Emblem go together like Konami and everything wrong with humanity. Honestly, I find it strange yet refreshing to see these 2 bond over their malice for their ancestors. Plus, I admire that despite having such a dark backstory, Sonya is a primarily punctual and lovely lady, with only the occasional outburst when her revulsion reveals itself. It is a shame that I didn't get to see more of Sonya, and though she doesn't exactly make for a magnanimous mage, she's got more than enough extravagance to excuse her inadequacies. Doubly so when witnessing her hero's artwork, because I think I speak for both men and women when I say, damn! Rolf. Hey look, another archer just so happened to statistically suck. Meanwhile, in other news, the sun is hot, grass is green, humans drink water, and Takumi still has a stick up his ass. Speaking of ass, the poor sod Rolf is privy to the disastrous detriment of reeking Radiant Rectum, as the little lad is atrocious in Path of Radiance and still pretty bad in Radiant Dawn when it comes to picking off enemies. Thankfully, all the effort he puts in at base camp pays off, as it was revealed to me that Rolf relegates some of the most emotional exchanges that show just how talented the writers of the Tellius series are. Well, some of them, since the people behind the Blood Pact and Astrid's Radiant Dawn characterization aren't exactly Oscar-worthy.
Do you think they were the ones behind the Fate story?
That would explain a lot. Much of what I addressed regarding Rebecca applies to Rolf across both games, such as bow and footlocked along with Borage bases. Now in Radiant Dawn, bow and footlocked isn't so bad, but the low bases can't be ignored. Well, his growths are strong and he's got high availability, so while a bad unit, he's not absolutely appalling. But the fact that Shilin exists makes Rolf more redundant than playing as Dr. Mario in Smash 4.
Mamma mia!
3 years before the battle with Benyon, his pitiful performance in Path of Radiance was the result of collective complications. Just plain disgusting digits, not the best accessibility, bows only dealing double damage, being bow locked which is a big problem, and a foot unit which is an even bigger problem. Specifically since Astrid, despite joining later, absolutely ostracizes the little crybaby. In fact, his only saving grace are his growths, and it'll take a lot more than that to convince me to keep you around, so no wonder Boyd thinks so little of you.
I don't fear you.
then you will die braver than most. Perhaps I was wrong.
Due to how bad this baby is in battle, for the longest time I didn't read any of his support conversations or pay attention to his character. Which is a shame because I discovered Rolf to be one complex kid. Rolf's personality is honestly nothing special. He's very young and not ready to be in battle with his brothers, but over time musters up the courage to contribute to the company. Plus he's prone to bawling his eyes out at the drop of a hat. No, seriously, watch. While his motivation is nothing to write home about, the way it ties into his supports is truly terrific, with characters like Marcia trying to convince him that growing up isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Preaching to the choir, honey. And Renault revealing to Rolf that the boy reminds him of his son, and due to dedicating so much of his life to his work, his family left him. And there are a lot of instances where Rolf's relations really hit on a personal level. Rolf additionally has a very sweet master-student relationship with Shinon along with his entire family dynamic, being one of my favourite parts of the Telia series, especially when he's given the chance to see his mother again, but refuses to since to him, she is but a stranger and the Grow mercenaries are his true family. I do feel slightly ashamed that it took me this long to finally get to know Rolf, but better late than never as they say, as while this twat may not be ready to participate as a full-fledged fighter, he's certainly on point to becoming an extravagant employee. Heck, it's thanks to him that Shinon even considered coming back, so bonus points for buttering up this bigot. Charlotte. I'm sure we're familiar with the expression don't judge a book by its cover and why it's one of the most important life lessons one can be taught. And while the themes of this phrase can be applied to just about everything, I interpret it as generally geared towards individuals, though sometimes a first glance can be all you need. I didn't trust Azuka the second I saw him, and it's the one time in my life I wish I was wrong. Well, that and the fact that EA would fuck up Anthem. Fire Emblem likes to affiliate this action with an assortment of aggressors, Charlotte in particular being the foremost frontrunner that fluctuates substantially between her supports, in order to showcase the juxtaposition between this brawling beauty and the helpless demeanour she puts on display, which sad to say extends to her pugnacious prowess as the empirically worst unit in the Norian army, which certainly confuses me, since if given a killer axe, she'll sometimes cause more destruction than Stormbreaker. Both Fire Emblem Fates Birthright and Conquest I feel did exceptionally well regarding unit balancing. However, they still contained a few catastrophic combatants, and in the case of Conquest, Charlotte claims the crown, as upon joining Corrin's forces she has very low bases and is exceptionally frail, making it difficult for her to get kills and survive for more than 2 seconds amidst all the chaos. And keep in mind, Conquest by design is pretty difficult, with minimal amounts of grinding, so utilising her and by extension making her effective is a challenge in of itself. Look, I know you're trying to act like a helpless damsel, but for God's sake, now is not the time! Aggregating this annoyance is the fact that her class line is just eh. Other axe users like Arthur, Haruka and Camilla all join earlier and make her practically pointless, plus all the units who arrive from the next chapter onwards are pre-promote, so Charlotte lags behind so much you can clear all 3 Xenoblade games before she becomes viable. That being said, her growth rates are very impressive, and it's not uncommon for her to be surprisingly potent with substantial investment. Plus, she makes for an excellent pair-up bot by granting her partner +8 strength and +5 speed, so naturally Xander becomes her ideal spouse as she's able to make his sword even stronger. Wooing men isn't new to Charlotte, as on the surface, she comes off as a very sweet and dainty damsel who loves to be the centre of attention. However, underneath all that makeup lies a very powerful and boisterous babe who's all about throwing down and smashing skulls. And in most cases, I personally wouldn't be on board with this type of character. Thankfully, Charlotte is able to avoid my abhorrence by having a sympathetic backstory and her actions being done for purely selfless reasons. In fact, she truthfully cannot stand putting on this persona, but she cares too much for her parents to simply give up, and I really admire that about her. Plus, the game demonstrates that both sides of her personality have their positives and negatives, so it isn't one-sided as to which type of person she should be. It helps that whether she's faking it or furious, Charlotte is a ton of fun and does ascertain a splendid selection of supports, in particular helping Nyx to finally able to reconcile with her inner child, and her marriage to Xander making for my favourite couple in the game. There will always be 2 sides to people for both better and worse, and though Charlotte doesn't contribute much in the field outside of the occasional critical and bolstering her beloved's blade, she did make for one of my favourite femme fatales that has just as much substance as she does splendour, though it is slightly worrying how easily she can be swayed by the promise of money. God forbid her opponent is loaded up the ass.
Alright, you fat fuck. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't rip your heart out and feed it to you!
Please, fair maiden, spare me. I have gold.
Silence, oaf! My beloved will not be so easily swayed by the promise of something so trivial. Right, darling? Darling?
How much gold?
How much do you want?
Sophia. Those of you who have been fortunate enough to play Binding Blade, I'd wager to be immediately informed that Sophia is either the worst or second worst unit in the game next to Gwendolyn, though it's inadvertently established to be one of the more interesting entities, though considering some of the casts, I don't think that's saying too much. Heck, I don't even remember this lot. While I'm not going to argue with her objective observations since, well, she really is that bad and the numbers don't lie, I can certainly settle on Sophia's status as a spellbinding shaman and one of my personal preferred pupils. Sure, she's no Lelina, but the gap between her performance and personality is about as wide as the length of time between the start and end of One Piece, and newsflash, it's probably not going to be finished during our lifetime. I've already outlined Sophia's statistics in top 10 worst Fire Emblem units, but as a quick refresher, she joins around the middle of the journey in one of the most challenging chapters with the lowest base stat total in the entire game. Having nauseatingly non-existent numbers, she might as well be a trainee, and is an easy target that will fall victim to 95% of the enemies in the map, most of which you can't see coming, and some of these fuckers can fly, so good luck getting her to the end alive if you want that guiding ring. While her growth rates may seem impressive, only a select few are of significance, and while Sophia's class line is perfectly fine, her competition couldn't be more cruel, with Ray joining 2 chapters earlier with a better build, and Nimi posing as possibly the best magic user in all of Alive, making Sophia nothing more than a hassle to hold on to, and far too much trouble to train. And yet, the one time I decided to take her under my wing, she somehow ended up kicking all kinds of ass, and she's not the only dreary dolt that was magnified by my methods. Perhaps I should apply for a teaching position.
Very well. What makes you think you're eligible to train the newest members of the Shepherds?
I got Gwendolyn to kill Sophia.
Sold! Howard, you've done it again.
While keeping Sophia safe from harm is harrowing to say the least, doing so isn't without its perks, as I've always admired Sophia's stature, coming off as a very introverted and reserved mademoiselle, that through her supports forces this shy shaman out of her comfort zone, in an attempt to befriend her brethren, with much of her dialogue covering several sides of Sophia's life, as well as the dilemma she faces due to the current conflict. Sophia continually contemplates as to how to use her power, and to what extent she should interfere with the war. She's absolutely breathtaken by the world around her, and simultaneously heartbroken at the bloodshed bathing alive, forever questioning her duty as it conflicts with her desires, all of which I found to be intriguing. And though I wish she spoke up more, there's something about this socially awkward shaman that I perceive to be especially endearing, all of which cemented Sophia in my eyes as a standout stalwart in Binding Blade. That remains one of my most adored occupants, along with being one of the biggest headaches I've ever had to handle, and being about as feeble as Fiona. I can't begin to imagine what transpired when it came to taking her prisoner.
Do you know who I am? Have you any idea how many anonymous henchmen I've killed over the years? And look at you, you haven't even got a name tag. You've got no chance. Why don't you just fall down? Go on, son.
Peleus. Aside from the fact that I find this series to be a lot of fun, I enjoy playing Fire Emblem games multiple times in order to learn more about each entry's collective cast. For example, did you know that Camilla's favourite food is steak, Louise was pregnant with Klein during the final battle, and Rickon likes reading stories that seem very similar to a certain holy war? Oh, I can't wait till he gets to chapter 5. The son of the late King of Dane takes this to a whole new level, as a minimum of 2 playthroughs were needed for myself to witness one of the most tragic characters in a series filled with solemn singularities, resulting in an excellent character arc achieved in such a short space of time. Sad to say, he never did live up to his father's name when it comes to eviscerating his adversaries, though considering he chose to specialise in the worst weapon type in the game, he's only got himself to blame. Peleus' situation regarding warfare I find to be incredibly intricate, as he is one of only 2 playable dark magic users in the entire game. However, once he finally makes it to the field, don't be surprised if you end up keeping him as far away from the action as possible, since magic straight up sucks in Radiant Dawn, not helped by the fact that his bases are poor and growth rates are just okay, which for someone who could be used for all of 2 chapters before the endgame isn't exactly in the running to oppose Ashira. Because the poor prince is set back by such disastrous detriments, he's commonly viewed to be not worth the trouble to train, even with such a unique niche and the benefit of high staff ranks upon promotion, which Micaiah already excels in and is forced into the endgame, as if she didn't do your job better to begin with. Concerning Micaiah's ability to make Peleus feel pointless, that's essentially the focus of his story arc, as he clearly doesn't command the respect or loyalty of his countrymen. Peleus I do think is a very nice lad, but the boy is notoriously naive, along with not having the confidence to speak with the Dawn Brigade directly, and essentially acts as a yes man to Izuku, who last time I checked wasn't exactly known for his words of wisdom.
I just knew it all along. Jagan's are the worst kinds of units and utterly useless on the harder difficulties. I must inform everyone of my genius discovery.
What I appreciate about this introvert is that though he's well aware of his meek mannerisms, resulting in his peers not taking him seriously, and instead looking to Micaiah as the beacon of hope for Dayan, instead of becoming bitter, it conversely escalates his admiration for the silver-haired maiden, and gradually throughout the game he learns to become more of a leader, and fulfill his role as king to his people. Additionally, I admire that his progression isn't straightforward, as during part 3 he hits his lowest point after being tricked into signing the Blood Pact, going so far as to straight up give up his life in order to break it, only for it to initially amount to nothing. Christ, I've heard of getting the short end of the stick, but this is ridiculous! Though something tells me Soph didn't feel too melancholy.
At least you died for honor, and my amusement!
This act of self-sacrifice just goes to show how altruistic the feeble fledgling is, making for a very interesting and complex character in a game that's already trying to bite off more than it can chew. Peleus perpetuated a considerable percentage of my resources to view him in his entirety, and while his magical magnitude is minimal at best, his journey from puppet to prince is one of the finest moments in Radiant Dawn and possibly the most prestigious newcomer to grace the Tellius series. But that's primarily because for everyone else, supports aren't a thing. After all, it's not like Fire Emblem is renowned for its characters. What could have possibly given you that idea? Renault. I've discerned that characters who join bizarrely late on average are either forgotten about or dismissed, and I'm not surprised given how little time there is to establish their existence unless they just so happen to be an absolute powerhouse. Look, Gifka, I may not know much about you, but no one else is going to bring down the Mad King, so congratulations, you're my new BFF.
Hey, I thought I was your BFF.
Can you damage Ashnard?
No, but I'm one of the most well-written characters in the game and a prime example of blurred morality throughout the series.
But can you damage Ashnard?
No.
My thoughts exactly. Interestingly enough, I've been made aware that sometimes these subordinates sustain supplementary substance, more so than those who have been with me since the beginning. Such is the case with Renault, who turned out to be an impeccably intriguing introvert, along with one of the biggest enigmas in all of Fire Emblem. And I'm not talking about who he is or where he comes from. I'm referring to how a bishop can have such a piss-poor magic stat at level 16. But then again, if a swordmaster can have bases so baffling the average Myrmidon can best him, I guess anything is possible. Not counting the Archsage Athos, Renault is the final combatant to be recruited in Blazing Sword, and based on his bases, he's probably not going to see much action out in the field. Now his digits aren't dreadful aside from low magic, but they're not that impressive either barring the extraordinary defense for a bishop. Plus, though his growths are okay, he's only got 4 more levels to go before capping the threshold, so they're essentially an afterthought. Compounding his crutches are the problems of being footlocked and using light magic, which by itself isn't very potent. Plus, aside from perhaps Nino, every other magic user in the game will be, on average, more powerful than his priest upon his arrival. However, extra staff utility and high weapon ranks are always appreciated. Since Renault relegates minute interludes with the rest of the party, trying to unlock all of his supports is one of the most tedious parts of any Fire Emblem game, and trust me, that says a lot. Because of his profession, many allies often seek his advice on how to cope with their inner turmoil. And though he's not exactly the friendliest of faces, he's more than happy to hear them out and offer his words of wisdom to help soothe their souls. Most of this wisdom stems from his past, which is exceptionally extensive, as before becoming a bishop, he began life as a thief, until one day he murdered a man who just so happened to be Lucius's father. And yes, their support is just as tragic as you'd expect, but also beautiful in how it brings both of them closure. From there, he wound up working with Nagal of all people, in an attempt to bring back a dear friend as a morph, only to be absolutely horrified by the result and finally choosing to spend the rest of his days as a bishop, in the hopes of making up for his past transgressions. Clearly a lot of care went into renovating Renault, and I especially admire that many of his supports reveal that he has deep-rooted relations to those who seek his solace, but also how he's able to guide them down the right path not only through his faith, but also through his life experience. Having such a deep and uniquely woven characterization, I felt resulted in a reasonably relatable and fascinating figure who may not be a magical master mage compared to Athos, but what he lacks in aptitude, he makes up for with astuteness, as Renault stands near the very tip top of the text-based tier list, which is how magnificent of a monk he turned out to be. In fact, his only real crime is how difficult the Holy Hermit makes it for players to learn all there is to know about him. Yeesh, I know you want to be left alone, but there's plenty of other ways to be ignored. Just look at Lowen, he's around for a long time and yet no one seems to care about him.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Sanaki. Fire Emblem exercises an emphasizing moral grey with its narratives, and it's part of what draws me to the franchise. However, during the Tales of Tellius, the nation of Benion certainly leaned more towards the darker end of the spectrum. Granted, Marcia, Astrid, and the Holy Guards are lovely, but the less said about the likes of Jared and Lacane, the better. You two are lucky to escape my wrath in top 10 worst characters. Just be thankful that piece of shit over there took your place.
I'm pretty sure his name is Makalov.
That's what I said, piece of shit. At the epicenter of it all is Empress Sanaki, who once she finally decided to step out of her ivory tower, didn't exactly make for an outstanding addition to Tellius' terrific team, instead prioritizing her arc to advance naturally throughout both games into such an elegant and refined young woman, and I find it hard to believe that she's only 13 by the end of the journey. Then again, Fire Emblem was always weird when it comes to assigning age, because apparently Hector's only 17. Yeah, sure, now she's gonna tell me Super Mario Maker 2 won't allow for online play with friends.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
Sanaki doesn't actually become a playable unit until Radiant Dawn after she's kicked out of her own house, but even with her position of power and vast amounts of arcane awareness, this small sovereign is a pretty mediocre monarch. First and foremost, Sanaki has very late availability, which is a massive red flag regarding Radiant Dawn, more so bearing in mind her bases aside from magic and res are poor and that magic in FE10 sucks as a whole. Sanaki can definitely deal heavy amounts of damage in a single shot, but rarely is it enough to ever take down her adversaries, and no way in hell will she be doubling foes during her lifetime. Tagging along with this train wreck is the fact that other mages like Soren are overall better, she's forced into the endgame and becomes positively pointless, can't ascertain staffs thus lacking additional utility, plus her growths while good overall, don't cover her biggest weaknesses, so I hope you enjoy getting one shot by the bluntest of blades. Sanaki's standing as the Empress of Benion puts her in a position above just about everyone in the entirety of Tellius, and for someone so supreme, Sanaki, shockingly, has some nasty habits like being a bit snobbish and very uptight concerning people's manners. Thank God you never heard of the internet. While this is a typical trope, I never once found Sanaki to be unlikable, as despite her age, she's a surprisingly sophisticated young miss, who acts humbler than most, but remains a child at heart, which I think is cute. Plus, during Path of Radiance, she uses her position of power for good, and is far more devious and clever than she lets on, presenting herself as a highly sophisticated but well-meaning monarch, even if she did act like an ass during Alencia's hearing. Look, I know that you're bored, but there are other ways to release the catharsis factor. Have you ever tried playing Smash Brothers?
What in the name of the goddess is a Smash Brothers?
My dearest Absaddle, you haven't left your quarters in months. I implore you to please come outside.
Fuck off, peasant, I'm busy!
Sanaki was an aristocrat I admired in Path of Radiance, but Radiant Dawn is where she truly lived up to her lineage, having to take her role more seriously after being betrayed, along with learning the truth about her heritage, with her entire arc in this game essentially acting as one giant reality check for the child and putting her through the most difficult time in her life. Yet in spite of so much strife and sucking as a spellcaster, Sanaki proved to myself and her subordinates that she's earned right to call herself Empress. Plus, I love the bond she shares with her two retainers, and yes, they all look wonderful in those bride outfits. But they sure as hell ain't bride for Jorm.
If my brother and sisters could see me now, I would be very happy.
Donnel. I'm sure to some of the newer Fire Emblem fans, placing the fan favourite farm boy this high may come as a bit of a shock. Not because he's a bad character, oh god no, I find Donnie to be delightful with some of the most charming and relatable relations I've ever read, but more so that those who chose to deploy Donnel know firsthand how a bit of grinding and a second seal can transform this bumbling bumpkin into a literal god. What's up, baby? Impressive as it may be, from a statistical standpoint, Donnel is actually one of the worst units in the game, though he can sleep soundly at night knowing he's still a splendid shepherd. But considering the type of training regimes this lot go through, I'll be surprised if anyone gets any sleep.
Day 10 and non-stop series!
Mr. Krabs, can I go home yet?
No one goes home! Look at these bags under my eyes! Even my bags have bags!
Now, when determining Donnel's decimals, yes, it is true that with grinding it's easy for him to become a huge powerhouse. However, objectively speaking, grinding is not an element that is factored in when doing this kind of analysis, as such an action can literally make everyone good. Once that stipulation is removed, Donnel accumulates into an atrocious ally, as during his debut the boy knew nothing of combat, so his bases are lazily low, making it particularly problematic for him to bludgeon some bandits without assistance, and survive more than 2 hits at best, bearing in mind he's Lancelot at E rank starting out, so good luck against those axe users and archers! Yeah! Even if Donnel does immaculate impressive growths, this applies to almost all of Awakening's ensemble, so it's not like grinding Donnel is of greater benefit than anyone else, though to his credit, as a father he can at least give 3 of the kids the Pegasus Knight class line, and by extension Gale Force, which pretty much speaks for itself. On the surface, Donnel did not seem like the most fascinating face due to having such humble beginnings, but when I grabbed a shovel and dug deeper into the depths of his demeanour, I discovered one of the most lovable and standout shepherds with an A-grade support chain. The pot-wearing pup has a wide-eyed curiosity about the world, and is eager to learn as much as possible after being so secluded up until now, which he does by conversing with the crew. And since each of them specialise in certain fields and have different areas of expertise, Donnel has no shortage of attention to provide each patron. I observed that a lot of Donnel's supports revolve around being educated in various different fields from each respective friend, hoping to augment a far more personal touch to all the interactions, sort of like a mentor-student relationship, except everyone is the master. On top of that, what I feel helps to make Donnel stand out aside from his speech pattern was that he frequently mentions his plans for the future once the war is over, something I don't believe most of the shepherds have considered. Plus, I also admire how everyone who takes Donnel on as their disciple discerns that he's a very astute learner, which I interpret as a way of reflecting his incredibly high growth potential, which is a nice attention to detail. Donnel is by no means the most complex or outlandish oddball amongst this bunch of buffoons. And sure, if you make him try and keep up with everyone while moving at breakneck speed, the poor chap's gonna break the darn thing. However, I sense that if you slow things down and take the time out to get to know Donnel and teach him the ways of the spear, he'll turn out to be a strapping young man and a splendid shepherd. Just goes to show that sometimes it's not about being the best of the bunch, but instead being the idyllic version of yourself, because what makes you different is what makes you Spider-Man.
Shush! Don't you go saying it out loud. I'm trying to lay low after Anna done figured out us awakening lot made so much money.
Problem is, we don't have a decent picture. Eddie's been on it for weeks. We can barely get a glimpse of him.
Oh, what is he, shy? If we can get a picture of Julia Roberts in a thong, we can certainly get a picture of this weirdo. Put an ad on the front page. Cash money for a picture of Spider-Man. He doesn't want to be famous, and I'll make him infamous.
Before I disclose who I think is the best of the worst, I'd like to do a few honourable mentions. Starting things off, we have none other than Lelina. Though she is the daughter of Hector, Lelina stacks up as the statistically weakest normal mage in Binding Blade, who though alright on normal mode and extremely powerful if trained, can barely muster so much as a spark on hard. However, she carries the pride of her father in her heart and sustains so many sensational supports she makes me smile with every syllable. Next in line we have Juno. Rarely does a flying unit turn out tangibly trash, but Juno found a way by joining far too late and having straight up silly numbers. Nevertheless, her presence alone permits her a page in my good book, and has such a wonderful family dynamic that warms my heart every time she opens her mouth. Moving onward to the next oddball named Odin. As much as he likes to think he holds the greatest power in the universe, Odin is a mediocre mage and one of the weaker members of the Norian army. But my god does he have a way with words, and I love his support chain so much that demonstrates the growth of his character since Awakening, while remaining just as rambunctious as ever. Finally, we're finishing up with Lynn, Ellawood, and Nino. All three of these tenants are terrible units that are set back by the likes of late join time, prolonged promotion, or being locked to the worst weapon types. However, their credentials concerning characterization I summarise as being second to none. However, myself and Honest Bigums have already discussed both aspects about all of them at length in top 10 Blazing Sword units, so feel free to check out that video for a more detailed depiction. Anyway, you've all waited long enough, time to reveal the number one entry. Amelia. Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones is widely regarded to be the easiest game in the series, which I wholeheartedly agree with, and as such it doesn't take much effort to transform the entire encampment into a glorious garrison, and it was honestly surprising to discover who is objectively obsolete. Did you know that Gilliam, Garcia, Marissa and even Loot are bad units? Yeah, I'm as shocked as you, especially because this prodigy always becomes Professor Powerhouse.
Later, bitch! The fuck off my screen!
Well, the fact of the matter is that Sacred Stones has its fair share of atrocious allies, with the girl from Grado Amelia being right near the bottom of the tier list and just plain bad in general. Which is unfortunate because almighty Miller is this lovely little lady, such an adorable angel, with a spectacular support sheet and one of my favourite faces in the GPA era, to the point where I'll happily deploy this dreadful dolt just so she can speak to her associates. Yes, I know it's silly, but I'm not the only one that does it. And besides, I'll unapologetically utilise underwhelming units.
You are aware that Nino is an awful unit and not worth investing in, correct?
You are aware that I don't give a shit. Amelia commences her excursion as a soldier from the Grado Empire, and if she's able to be featured among their ranks, it's no wonder Sacred Stones is piss easy. Amelia's assignment as a trainee allocates her with terrible starting stats that even Gwendolyn would scoff at, though out of the three toddlers she has the highest in total, but that's honestly not saying much. Additionally, her growth rates are abnormally mediocre, along with joining not exactly late, but at a point where there's more than enough units at the player's disposal, with the remainder of recruits being leagues above this little lass. Except for Ewan, who's an embarrassment to all magic users. Amelia also has crap weapon ranks and can only promote into the Knight and Cavalier class line, which aren't exactly unique. But to her credit, becoming a Cavalier and by extension Paladin is an automatic yes. Plus, since Sacred Stones is so easy, even with standard level up, she'll be able to wipe the floor with the opposition. Which is good because if Amelia was featured in any other Fire Emblem game, she'd be about as effective as Hercule Satan. Which would honestly be hilarious to witness. As quantitatively quarrelsome as Amelia may be, I've known many players plus yours truly, who take the time out to unlock her full potential, not because she's a good unit, rather how much of an adorable adversary she is, who through a multitude of meetings, I felt to be one of the sweetest and equally substantial soldiers in the series. As Amelia is so inexperienced, she garners great appreciation to those who aid her, and does fall for a lot of the beginner's traps being a new recruit, adding to her charm and making her feel more realistic, since just because she's on the winning side doesn't automatically make her a master. Amelia I observe to be a heavy juxtaposition to the majority of Greylo's garrison, as while she is loyal and prideful of her homeland, she doesn't disregard the fact that what they're doing is wrong, and it's this attitude that helps her fit in with the rest of Rhaenys despite hailing from an enemy nation. Her supports demonstrate this to great effect, as they're more light-hearted in tone and make for very endearing exchanges, simultaneously addressing both parties' backstories frequently, such as her support with Franz acting as my favourite of the bunch and one of the best in the series, because these two together are just carnal levels of cute. Both of them. Amelia's attitude I not only find to be ludicrously lovable, but also helps to lift the spirits of those she spends time with. Plus, I thought it was nice that the majority of her discussions are with allies of an adjacent age, a factor I observed to help both parties be more comfortable around each other, the only exception to the rule being Duessel, who is able to see that there is still hope for Greylo through Amelia, and that thanks to him the truth about her mother is revealed and her story comes full circle. I could go on and on about what makes Amelia amazing, but any more indulgence would be considered paddering, and God knows my videos aren't exactly short. Nevertheless, Amelia may not have what it takes to become a standout soldier, or even make it off the bench in some cases, but while her performance needs some practice, her heart is forever in the right place, and thanks to said sentiment, she's without a doubt one of my favourite females in Fire Emblem, and all the more reason I'll pick character over combat any day of the week, which is why she takes the #1 spot as my favourite bad Fire Emblem unit that is a good character. This has been Blazing Knight. I wish you all a great night, take care, and unsurprisingly, every Fire Emblem entity will have their strengths and weaknesses, with a select few unable to secure so much as a scratch. However, if there's one thing this franchise has taught me, is that a tenant's talents may lie elsewhere, and proves that there's so much more to this series than just swinging swords, though sadly not every rascal resonates with my reasoning. Thank you all for watching today, I hope you had a great time and enjoyed the video. Please let me know what you thought in the comments, and what do you find to be bad Fire Emblem units that are good characters. Also, I'd like to say a special thank you to Brendan Glover, Brent Matthews, Chaz Aria, Chris Digital Dreams, Cody Anderson, Crystal's Corner, Faraday8392, Karo Fujimaki, Maggie Fall, Sam Spicer, and Soren for providing the voices for this video, along with everyone else who contributed as well. Thank you all so much, I couldn't have done this without you. You people are just absolutely awesome. Also, please don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe and hit that notification bell, follow me on Twitter, Discord and Amino, check out my Twitch channel where I live stream 3 times a week, and if you'd like to go that extra mile, please consider donating to my Patreon to receive some additional bonuses. And finally, before I go, I want to say the biggest, absolutely massive thank you to all my patrons who this video is for, and make these videos possible. I can't believe it's been over a year since I've started Patreon, and I'm so glad that all of you have been supporting me all this time to help make these videos possible. I know sometimes that, things don't go as they planned, and, sometimes, it's getting harder and harder to make videos with all this production quality I'm putting in, but I'm so happy that all of you make these videos possible, that I can keep doing this, that I can make my stuff better, and that you just keep supporting me all this time. I love you all so much for doing so. It means, I can't, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoy. This is only part 1 of the celebration, so I hope you look forward to the next part 2. And I'd like to say special mention to Chaos Saberline, Justin Konovich, Vanessa Westfall, Alex, Great Triek, Levy94, Lucina21, Boogie, Midnight Castle, Botanko Fan 32, Maggie Fall, Vincent Clark, Jeremy Redinger, Arkarai, Daniel Hodgson, The Main Idea, and Feralin8392. You people are just love you all so much. You're the absolute best. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll see you all next time for part 2.